Hey guys, tonight we're pushing open the front door of a neighbourhood grocery store on a warm Saturday morning in the early 1960s, back when a little bell above the door announced you before you even said a word. The floor is freshly waxed and catching the light. The air is a soft blend of ground coffee, butcher paper, ripe cantaloupe, and something sweet drifting over from the bakery counter. And nobody's in a hurry. Not the grocer, not the woman weighing peaches, not the boy stacking cans in a careful pyramid he is quietly proud of. Back then, a trip to the store was not a chore squeezed between a dozen other errands. It was a small event, something the whole family looked forward to all week. Before we go any further, I want to say a genuine thank you to the viewer who suggested this one. You sent this idea in so gently, almost like you weren't sure it counted, and it turned out to be one of my favourites to sit with. This channel really is shaped by the little memories and quiet requests you send me, and I never take that for granted. So if you ever think of a moment from this era you would like to revisit together, tell me down in the comments. And if this kind of slow, gentle wandering through the past is your sort of thing, feel free to like the video and subscribe. No pressure at all, just so more folks who miss these days can find their way here. And for anyone who likes to drift off to these stories with their eyes closed, the channel is now on Spotify too. The link is waiting for you down in the description whenever you want it. Now go ahead and get comfortable. Dim the lights until the room goes soft and golden. Switch on a fan for that low, steady hush. Pull the blanket up, settle into your pillow, and let your shoulders come down from wherever they have been holding all day. And as you settle, let yourself wonder a few things. What did a Saturday morning actually feel like in 1962, with the whole day still ahead of you and the grocery list tucked in your mother's purse? What did the store smell like the moment you walked in, before you had even reached for a cart? What was it like to be greeted by name at the meat counter, to lick a sheet of trading stamps at the kitchen table, to carry your groceries home in warm brown paper that crinkled in your arms? Do you remember the sound a cash register used to make? Do you remember penny candy and butcher paper and the milkman's bottles waiting on the step? And just like that, it is 1962. The morning is bright and unhurried. Somewhere down the block a screen door taps shut. The car is warm from the sun, the grocery list is written in your mother's neat hand, and the whole family is heading to the store together. Let's go inside. Let's start with the morning itself. You wake to the smell of coffee and the sound of your mother moving around the kitchen, checking the icebox, pressing a pencil to a list she's been adding to all week. This is not a quick run for a forgotten gallon of milk. This is the trip. The one the whole household orbits around, and you can feel the small importance of it in the air. You put on real shoes, maybe a clean shirt. Your father jingles the car keys, your mother folds her list into her purse, and out you all go together into a morning that feels like it has been set aside just for this. The list itself is a small work of art. It has been living on the counter since Monday, held down by the sugar bowl, and every day something new was added in your mother's careful hand as the week revealed what the house was running low on. A loaf of bread, coffee, something for Sunday supper. She has an order to it that only she understands, grouped the way the store is laid out so that nothing gets missed and no aisle gets walked twice. You have watched her do this your whole life without ever quite realizing it was a skill. Outside, the neighborhood is just beginning to stir. A man 2 doors down is rolling his hose out across the lawn. Someone's radio drifts through an open window, low and cheerful. The car has been sitting in the morning sun, and the seats are warm when you slide across them, the vinyl faintly sticky, the whole inside smelling of heat and dust and your father's aftershave. You roll the window down by hand, cranking it in slow circles, and the breeze comes in soft and full of cut grass. There is no rushing this. The store is not open at every hour of the day and night, and so the trip has a proper time and a proper shape. You go when the family goes together, and there is a rhythm to that which has almost entirely slipped away from us. Nobody is checking a phone. Nobody is splitting off to run 3 errands at once. The whole point of the morning is simply this one errand, done well and done together, and the doing of it is half the pleasure. Your mother has dressed for it too. Not fancy, but presentable, because you might see anyone at the store, a neighbour, the minister's wife, a cousin you have not run into in months. Going to the grocer is a public thing, a place where the town gathers and mingles and catches up, and you dress with a little care the way you would for church or a visit. It is a small dignity that we have quietly set down, this idea that going out into the world among people was worth looking decent for. The drive is short, but it feels like part of the outing. You pass the same landmarks you always pass, the filling station with its round-topped pumps, the school sitting empty for the weekend, the church on the corner. Your father lifts 2 fingers off the steering wheel to wave at a passing car, and the other driver waves back, because in a town this size, everyone more or less knows everyone. It is the kind of easy recognition that made a place feel like home in a way that is harder to come by now. And then the store comes into view, and something in you lifts a little. The plate glass windows are papered with hand-lettered signs announcing the week's specials, ground beef and canned peaches and coffee by the pound. The screen door is propped open to let in the morning air. A stack of empty crates leans by the entrance, and the whole front of the building has that welcoming, well-used look of a place people go every single week without fail. Your father parks, and there is a small ceremony to everyone getting out, the doors thunking shut one after another, your mother smoothing her skirt, your father settling his hat. You gather at the entrance the way a family gathers, unhurried, whole. For a moment before you go in, you can smell it already, drifting out through the open door, the coffee and the bread and the faint cool tang of the produce. Looking back now, it is almost strange how much weight this ordinary morning carried. Shopping today is something we do alone, quickly, distracted, an item on a list we are trying to clear. But then it was an occasion. It gathered the family. It marked the week. It sent you out into your own community dressed and ready to be seen and to see others. When he speaks to your mother, it is not the practice friendliness of someone paid to be pleasant. It is the real ease of 2 people who've known each other a long time and share 100 small histories. He knows things about your family that no ledger records. He knows your father favours a particular brand of pipe tobacco. He knows that when your mother buys extra flour, company is coming. He remembers the winter your baby brother was sick and she could not get to the store, and how he sent the boy over with a box of what she needed and would not hear a word about it. This knowing is not written down anywhere. It lives in him, gathered slowly across years of Saturdays, and it makes shopping feel less like a transaction and more like a visit. You wander a little while your mother talks, and the grocer keeps half an eye on you the way he keeps an eye on all the neighbourhood children, kindly and without suspicion. If you reach too high for something, he is there. If you look lost, he points the way. He is not merely a man who sells things. He is a fixture of your childhood, as familiar as a school teacher or a next-door aunt, one of those steady grown-ups who form the quiet backdrop of growing up in a small place. Other customers drift in, and the same thing happens with each of them. A greeting by name, a question about a son off in the service, a garden that finally came in, a roof that needed patching. This store becomes a kind of gathering place, a slow crossroads where the whole neighbourhood passes through over the course of a morning and pauses to speak. News travels here. Sympathy travels here. So does gentle gossip and news of who is ailing and who is expecting. It is the town's living room, presided over by a man in an apron. There is a trust in it too that runs deeper than friendliness. When your mother is a few cents short, he waves it off and says, "Settle it next time," and means it. When she's unsure whether the roast is good, he tells her plainly, because his name is on this store and his word is the only advertising he has ever needed. He cannot afford to sell you something poor, not because a corporate office is watching, but because he will see you again next Saturday, and the one after that, and he has to look you in the eye every time. It is worth sitting for a moment with how different that is from the way we shop now. We move through enormous bright stores where no one knows us, scanned by machines, watched by cameras, helped, if we are helped at all, by someone who will never see us again and whose name we never learn. There is a freedom in that anonymity, perhaps, but there is also a loneliness to it, a sense of being nobody in particular that the old grocer's simple greeting would have cured in an instant, because to be known is a quiet kind of gift. To walk into a place and have someone light up and say your name, to be remembered, to have your small preferences held in someone's mind, that is a form of care so ordinary in those days that no one thought to be grateful for it. It stitched a person into the fabric of a place. It told you, every single week, that you were seen and expected and welcome. The grocer finishes with your mother and turns to help the next neighbour, but not before he slips you a stick of candy with a wink, the way he always does, as if it were a secret just between the two of you, though he does it for every child who comes through the door. You take it, and you feel, without having the words for it, that you are part of something. That was the true stock of the old grocery store. Not the cans on the shelves or the meat in the case, but the knowing. A man who remembered you, and a family who trusted him, and a bond built out of nothing more than showing up, week after week, and treating each other well. It is much harder to find now, and it was worth more than anything on the shelves. Head toward the back of the store where the butcher stands behind a long glass case in a clean white apron. Nothing here comes wrapped and priced ahead of time. You tell him what you need, 1.5 pounds of ground chuck, a roast for Sunday, chops cut thick, and he goes to work right in front of you, the blade quick and sure, his hands wrapping the meat in crisp white paper and tying it with string. He weighs it, marks the price with a pencil, and hands it over still cool from the case. It is slow and personal and made just for you. The case itself is a thing to behold, a long stretch of glass kept spotless, the meat arranged inside on trays with a kind of pride. There are roasts and chops and links of sausage the butcher made himself, and a rail of the day's cuts laid out for you to consider. A faint chill rolls off the glass when you lean close, carrying the clean cold smell of the case, and behind it stands the butcher, ready to give you exactly what you ask for and nothing you do not. He is an expert, this man, and it shows in his hands. He knows his trade the way a carpenter knows wood, where to place the knife, how the muscle runs, which cut will do best for a stew, and which for a quick supper on a weeknight. When your mother is unsure, she asks him, and he answers plainly, steering her toward the better value or the tastier cut without a hint of trying to sell her more than she needs. His advice is worth having because he has given it 10,000 times and never once been in a hurry. You watch him work, and there is something almost soothing in it. He selects the piece, sets it on the block, and the knife moves with an economy that comes only from long practice. When your mother asks for ground chuck, he does not reach for a plastic tube already filled. He takes the meat, feeds it through the grinder right there, and it comes out fresh in soft red coils. You could not get closer to the source unless you raise the animal yourself. Then comes the wrapping, and it is its own small art. He tears a sheet of white paper from the big roll with a single clean pull, lays the meat in the centre, and folds it up snug in a few practised motions, corners tucked, edges sealed. From a spool overhead he pulls a length of string, loops it around the parcel and ties it off with a quick knot, snapping the string with a flick of his wrist. He grease pencils the weight and the price on the top and slides it across to you, and the whole thing looks like a little present. There was no guessing with this meat. You saw it cut. You saw it weighed, the needle swinging and settling on the scale in plain view. You knew it had not been sitting for days behind plastic under a bright light meant to keep it looking rosy. It was as fresh could be, handled by a man who put his name and his reputation on every parcel that left his counter, and that certainty was worth a great deal. He knows your family's taste too, the same way the grocer up front does. He knows your father likes his steak on the thicker side and cuts it that way without being reminded. He remembers that your mother is feeding a crowd this Sunday and suggests a larger roast, and mentions that the pork came in especially good this week if she is interested. It is not a sales pitch. It is a neighbour telling a neighbour what is worth having, and you trust it completely. Set this beside the meat aisle of today, and the difference is quietly enormous. Now the meat waits in identical foam trays under tight plastic, weighed and priced by machines, sealed by hands you will never see in a room you will never enter. It is convenient, and it is clean, and it asks nothing of you. But there is no one to ask, no expert to steer you, no craftsman to cut it fresh, no face to trust. You take what the shelf offers and hope for the best. The old butcher counter asked you to speak, to choose, to trust another person's skill, and it gave you something back in return. Not just meat, but the assurance of a job done right by someone who cared to do it well. It made a supper feel like it began with a small act of craftsmanship rather than a barcode. So you take your neat white parcel, still cool against your palm, tied with its little bow of string, and you thank the man by name. He nods and turns to the next customer, wiping his hands on his apron, ready to do it all again. It was such a simple thing, this cutting of meat to order, and it carried a care that no sealed tray has ever quite managed to hold. It is settling up time now, and with your groceries comes a little gift. The clerk counts out sheets of trading stamps, one for every so many cents you spent, and drops them into your bag like small green treasure. At home, this becomes a whole quiet evening of its own. You spread the stamps across the kitchen table, run your tongue along the backs of them, and press them carefully into the little books one square at a time. It is sticky and slow and strangely soothing. A family gathered around a table, turning ordinary shopping into something that feels like saving up for a dream. The stamps themselves are a small marvel to a child. They come in perforated sheets, each stamp bright with its little printed design, and the clerk tears them off with the ease of long habit, counting under his breath, the amount tied to how much your mother spent. The bigger the week's shopping, the fatter the strip of stamps, and so there is a strange satisfaction even in a large grocery bill, because it means a thicker stack of stamps to carry home. At the table after supper, the ritual begins. The saver books come out of the drawer, soft-cornered and half-filled from weeks past. A saucer of water sits nearby for the grown-ups, though you prefer to do it the honest way, licking each stamp yourself and pressing it into its square. The taste is faint and papery and not entirely pleasant, but you do not mind because you are part of something now, part of the slow filling of the books. There is a right way and a wrong way to do it, and your mother oversees the operation with gentle authority. The stamps must go in straight, lined up neat in their rows, no gaps and no overlaps. A book done sloppily is a small shame, and so you take your time smoothing each one down with a fingertip, and the table grows quiet with concentration. The only sounds the soft peel of a stamp and the tick of the clock on the wall. What makes it more than a chore is what the books are for. They are not merely a reward, they are a plan. Somewhere in the house is the catalogue, and in that catalogue is the thing the family is saving toward, and every stamp pressed into every square brings it a fraction closer. So the licking and the smoothing are not idle. They are the slow, patient work of wanting something and earning it, week by week, and letting the wanting build. You come to understand the arithmetic of it without anyone teaching you. So many stamps to a page, so many pages to a book, so many books to the toaster, or the lamp or the wristwatch. You learn that patience has a shape and a size, and can be measured out in little green squares. You learn that good things come slowly, and are sweeter for the waiting. It is a lesson delivered not in words, but in the simple act of saving. A lesson that has grown rare in a world where almost anything can be had at once. There is something companionable about it too, the whole family bent over the table together, the radio playing low, a plate of cookies making the rounds. Nobody is off in a separate room. The task is small enough that everyone can help, and pleasant enough that no one minds, and in the doing of it the evening knits itself together. Saving stamps was never really about the toaster. It was about the sitting together, the shared small labour, the quiet hum of a household pulling in the same direction, and it made the shopping feel connected to something. Every trip to the store fed the books. The mundane act of buying flour and coffee became, in a small way, a step toward a reward the whole family had chosen together. There was a thread running from the grocery bag to the kitchen table, to the catalogue, to the thing you would one day carry proudly home, and you could feel that thread, taut and hopeful, running through the ordinary weeks. We have nothing quite like it now. There are points and rewards and cards, of course, but they accumulate silently, invisibly, in a phone or a database, requiring nothing of us, gathered without our even noticing. No one sits at a table licking them into a book. No child feels the fat stack of them in a small fist. The saving has been made frictionless, and in becoming frictionless it has lost the very thing that made it mean anything. The waiting, the working, the wanting made real. So the book fills page by page, Saturday by Saturday, and the drawer holds it safe until the next batch comes home. Your tongue is a little numb, and your fingertips are a little sticky, and the toaster is one evening closer than it was before. It was such a small and humble thing, this pasting of stamps, and it held quietly some of the deepest pleasures there are: patience and togetherness, and the sweetness of earning what you longed for. Now picture the catalogue that came with those stamps, thumbed soft at the corners and kept in the kitchen drawer. On slow afternoons you would open it and wander through the pages, past the toaster and the card table, the wristwatch, the bicycle you had your eye on. Every full book of stamps brought that bicycle a little closer, and so you shopped and licked and pasted and waited. There was a patience to it that we've mostly lost. You could not have the thing today with a single tap. You had to earn it, book by book, week by week, and the waiting made it sweeter. The catalogue was a wish book, and every family had one. It lived in the kitchen drawer among the string and the rubber bands and the odds and ends, and it came out on rainy days and quiet Sunday afternoons when there was nothing pressing to do. You would lie on the floor with it open in front of you, turning the pages slowly, and the whole world of possible rewards would spread out before you, page after glossy page of things a family could want. There was a rich pleasure simply in the looking. Here was a shining chrome toaster. Here a set of matching luggage, a floor lamp, a wristwatch with a leather band. Here, on the page you always turned to last because it was your favourite, the bicycle, gleaming and complete, with a number beneath it telling you exactly how many books of stamps it would cost. You memorised that number. You did the sums in your head. You knew, to the book, how far away the bicycle still was, and the distance was part of the magic. You could not have it now. There was no way to reach through the page and take it, no way to have it delivered by tomorrow, no shortcut and no rush. The only path to the bicycle ran straight through the grocery store, week after week, one full book at a time. And so the wanting had room to grow. You thought about the bicycle. You dreamed about it. You imagined the day you would finally wheel it home, and the imagining was its own long, sweet pleasure. This is a thing that is genuinely hard to explain to anyone who did not live it. This richness of anticipation. The waiting was not an inconvenience to be eliminated. The waiting was where the joy lived. Each Saturday's stamps were another step, and you felt each step, and the reward at the end had been dreamed about for so many weeks that by the time it came, it was almost holy. You had earned it slowly, and slowness had made it precious. The catalogue also taught you gently what things cost, not in dollars, but in effort. You learned that the bicycle was worth many more books than the toaster, and so you understood without a lesson that some things are dear and some are dear indeed, and that the best things ask the most of you. You weighed your wanting against the number of books, and in doing so you learned to want wisely, to choose, to set your heart on one thing and see it through. And it was always a family affair. The books belonged to the household, and so the choosing did too. There were negotiations at the kitchen table, your bicycle against your mother's new mixing bowls, your brother's baseball glove against a lamp for the front room. You learned that a family's wanting has to be shared out, that not everyone can have everything, that patience sometimes means waiting your turn behind someone else's dream. These were quiet lessons in living together, delivered by a stamp catalogue. Set that against the way wanting works for us now. We see a thing, we tap a screen, and in a day or two it appears on the porch, and the wanting barely had time to bloom before it was satisfied and forgotten. There is a convenience in that which no one would truly wish to give up. But something has been lost along with the waiting, some depth of pleasure, some sense of having earned a thing rather than merely acquired it. The bicycle you saved a year for meant more than any bicycle ever could that came the next morning in a box. So you close the catalogue and slide it back into the drawer, the bicycle still a dozen books away, and instead of frustration you feel a warm, patient hope. There is more shopping to come, and more stamps, and more evenings at the table, and slowly, surely, the day is coming. You can wait. You have learned how to wait, and the waiting has made the wanting a kind of quiet happiness all its own. That was the strange gift buried in a book of trading stamps. It made you patient, and patience, it turns out, is one of the great lost pleasures. To long for a thing slowly, to earn it a little at a time, to hold the dream close for weeks and months, and at last to bring it home, that was a joy we hardly know anymore. And it began on a rainy afternoon, on the kitchen floor, with a soft-cornered catalogue open to the bicycle page. It is the end of your shopping now, and there are no plastic sacks and no self-checkout. A boy in an apron packs your groceries into sturdy brown paper bags, and he does this with real care, cans on the bottom, bread and eggs riding gently on top. Then, without being asked, he lifts the bags into his arms and walks you all the way out to the car, chatting the whole way, and loads them into the trunk. You thank him, maybe press a coin into his hand, and he tips his head and jogs back inside. It was a small kindness offered as a matter of course. The bagging itself is a skill, and the good bag boys take pride in it. There is a right way to pack a paper sack so that nothing crushes and nothing tips, and the boy has learned it. The heavy cans and boxes go in first, forming a solid base. The bread and the eggs and the ripe tomatoes ride on top where nothing can bruise them. He balances the weight between the bags so no one's sack is too heavy, and he folds the tops down neat. It is the sort of small competence that a young fellow could feel genuinely good about, and it shows. He is likely a neighbourhood boy, working after school and on Saturdays, saving for something of his own, or handing the money to his family. Everyone knows who Sonny is. He is polite because his mother would hear about it if he were not, and because the grocer would not stand for it, and because this is a small town and a boy's manners follow him around. So he says yes ma'am and no sir, and he means it, and he treats your bags as if they mattered. The walk to the car is part of the service and part of the pleasure. He carries the sacks in his arms, and you walk beside him out into the bright parking lot, and he makes easy conversation the whole way about the weather, about the ball game, about whether school is treating you right. It is nothing, and it is everything, this small stretch of friendly talk between two people who know each other a little. It costs him nothing but a few steps and a few words, and it leaves you feeling looked after. At the car he waits while your father opens the trunk, and then he settles the bags in carefully, wedging them so they will not slide on the drive home, arranging them the way he arranged them in the first place, heavy things steady, fragile things safe. He shuts the trunk with a solid thunk, steps back, and wishes you a good day. Perhaps your mother presses a coin into his palm and he accepts it with a quick thanks. Or perhaps not, because plenty of the time this was simply what the store did. No tip expected, just service. Then he jogs back toward the store, already glancing toward the next family coming out with their arms full, ready to do it again. He will do this all day, dozens of times, bag after bag, car after car, and there is a cheerful tirelessness to it that speaks of a whole ethic now grown rare. The idea that a job, even a humble one, is worth doing well and doing kindly. There is a lesson folded into all of this, quiet and unspoken. The grocery store took it upon itself to help you the last few steps, to carry the weight, to see you safely to your car. It did not leave you to wrestle your own load out through the doors and across the lot. It sent a friendly young person to lighten the burden, because that was simply how you treated people who came to spend their week's grocery money with you. Service was not an upcharge, it was a courtesy. Compare it to the way it goes now, and the loss is plain. We bag our own groceries, or we scan and sack them entirely alone at a machine, and we haul them out ourselves, juggling flimsy plastic that cuts into our fingers, hoping the eggs survive. There is no boy, no chatter, no helping hand, no coin pressed in thanks. It is faster, perhaps, and cheaper for the store. But something warm has gone out of it. Some small human grace that made the end of the errand feel like being cared for rather than merely finishing a task. And there was dignity in it on both sides. The boy earned an honest wage and a good name doing honest work. The family received a genuine kindness. Between them passed a moment of ordinary decency, repeated 100 times a day, so common it was invisible, The sort of thing that made a community feel like a community rather than a crowd of strangers passing through. So you watch him jog back to the doors, apron flapping, already smiling at the next family, and you settle into the warm car with your groceries safe in the trunk behind you. It was such a little thing being walked to your car, and it was the kind of little thing that told you without a single grand word that here you were among people who wished you well. Before you leave the counter, notice that no money changes hands at all. The grocer simply opens a worn ledger, finds your family's page, and writes down what you owe in his careful hand. Your groceries go on the tab, to be settled at the end of the month or on payday. However, the arrangement was made years ago on nothing more than a handshake and good standing. It was trust written in pencil, a whole relationship built on the quiet understanding that a neighbour pays what a neighbour owes. It is hard to imagine that kind of easy faith between a store and a family now. The ledger is a heavy book, its cover soft and darkened from years of handling, and inside it holds a page for nearly every family in town. The grocer knows just where to find yours. He wets the tip of his pencil, runs a finger down the column, and adds the day's total to what came before, the figures marching down the page in his small, neat script, a running record of your household's needs stretching back through the seasons. There is no card, no credit check, no application filled out in triplicate. The account exists because you are who you are, because your family has shopped here for years, because your father is a man of his word and everyone knows it. The whole arrangement rests on reputation, on the simple fact that in a town this size a person's name means something, and no one can afford to let it be tarnished over a grocery bill. Your good standing is your credit, and it is worth more than any number a bank could assign. The rhythm of it follows the rhythm of working life. The bill runs through the month, and then on payday, when your father's wages come in, the family settles up. Your mother comes to the counter, or your father does, and pays down what is owed, and the grocer draws a line through the total and thanks them, and the page begins again. It is a rhythm as old as work itself, the ebb and flow of earning and owing, kept honest by nothing more than mutual trust. And that trust runs both ways. In a lean month, when the money is short, the grocer carries the account a little longer without complaint. He knows hard times come to everyone. He knows your family will make it right when they can, because they always have, and because he would do the same for any decent household in town. He's not a bank calculating interest and penalties. He's a neighbour extending a hand, understanding that a family has to eat whether or not payday has arrived. There is a vulnerability in this that we would find strange now, this willingness to owe and be owed, to let another person keep a written record of your needs and trust you to make good. But there was also a dignity in it, and a closeness. The grocer knew your family's circumstances, the tight weeks and the flush ones, and he never held it over you. The ledger held your secrets in a way, and he kept them, and the keeping was a kind of respect. It bound the store and the family together too. You could not easily take your business elsewhere when your account and your history and your good name all lived in that one worn book. And the grocer could not easily treat you poorly when he depended on your continued custom and your eventual payment. You were tied to each other, store and family, by threads of obligation and trust that made you both more careful, more loyal, more decent than strangers ever need to be. We have replaced all of this with plastic and screens, and it is efficient beyond anything the old grocer could have dreamed. Credit now comes from distant institutions that have never met us and never will, granted or refused by machines, tracked to the penny, enforced without mercy. There is no neighbour carrying us through a hard month out of simple goodwill, no handshake, no page in a book kept by a man who knows our mother. The trust has been outsourced, and in the outsourcing it has become colder and somehow smaller. Because the old way was never really about the money, it was about the relationship. The ledger was a record of faith, proof that a store believed in a family and a family honoured a store week after week, year after year. It said, in its quiet columns of pencil, that you were known and trusted and worth carrying when times were hard. That is a thing money cannot buy, and machines cannot grant. So the grocer closes the ledger and slides it back beneath the counter, your day's needs safely recorded, no coin having crossed the counter at all. It was such an ordinary transaction, this writing down of a bill, and it rested on something extraordinary. A plain and durable trust between neighbours, the kind that is very hard to find now and was worth more than anything the store could sell. Look closely at the cans lined up on the shelf. There is no barcode, no scanner waiting at the front to read them in a red flash. Each price is written by hand, in soft white or purple grease pencil, right on the top of the can or the edge of the box. Someone stood in this aisle and marked every single one. And when the price of coffee went up a few cents, someone came back through and marked them all again. There was a human hand on everything you bought, and you could feel it, even if you never thought to notice it at the time. The marking was a job in itself, done by the grocer or the stock boy in the quiet hours before the store filled up. A carton of goods would come in, and out would come the grease pencil, and one by one each item would be priced by hand and set on the shelf. It was patient work and repetitive, and it meant that a real person had held every can, every box, every jar that you would later lift into your basket. Nothing arrived on the shelf untouched by human hands. The prices themselves were plain and honest, written in a script you could read at a glance, a few cents here, a dime there, the numbers frank and unadorned. There were no confusing schemes, no prices ending in odd fractions designed to trick the eye, no need to scan an item to discover what it truly cost. What you saw written on the can was what you paid, and the simplicity of it was a small kindness in itself. When you reached the counter, the clerk read those hand-marked prices and rang them up one by one, and so the pricing and the paying were both done by people, in plain view, with nothing hidden. You could watch your total grow. You could check the marks against what the clerk charged. There was a transparency to it, an openness that came simply from the fact that human beings, and not machines, were handling the whole affair from shelf to sack. There is something worth pausing over in that human touch, invisible though it was at the time. Every item in the store had been carried, considered, and marked by someone who worked there, someone you probably knew by name. The shelves were not stocked by an anonymous system but by the hands of neighbours. When you bought a can of peaches, you were, in a small way, completing a chain of human effort that ran from the stockboy's grease pencil straight to your kitchen table. It also meant the store moved at a human pace. Prices did not change in an instant at the whim of some distant office. When they changed, a person had to walk the aisles and remark the goods, and so change came slowly, deliberately, announced in the hand-lettered signs in the window. There was a steadiness to it. You more or less knew what things cost from week to week, and the knowing gave the household budget a firm ground to stand on. Set this beside the store of today, where every item wears a barcode and a scanner reads the price from a database you cannot see, where prices can shift by the hour on a screen, and no human hand need ever touch the goods at all. It is a wonder of efficiency, and it has made shopping faster than the old grocer could have imagined. But it has also made it strangely impersonal A matter of machines reading codes to other machines, the human hand vanished from the whole affair. The grease-penciled can belonged to a world where labour was visible, and the people who did it were near. You knew who priced your groceries and who rang them up, and who bagged them, and who carried them to your car, and often they were the same handful of neighbours doing an honest day's work in plain sight. The store was made of people, and their care, or their lack of it, was written right there on the top of every can. There was accountability in that too. A price marked by a person could be questioned, discussed, understood. If something seemed off, you could ask the grocer, and he would look, and he would explain because he was standing right there and the marks were in his own hand. Now a scanner rings up a price, and there is no one to ask, no hand behind it, only a system that must simply be trusted or disputed with a distant, faceless authority. So you take your hand-marked can down from the shelf, the price plain in soft purple pencil on the lid, and you add it to your basket without a second thought. It was such a small and ordinary thing, a number written by hand, and it was quiet proof of a whole world of human care, a store made of neighbours, where nothing reached your table that a person had not first held in their hands. Down low near the front sits the counter that every child in town knows by heart. Rows of glass jars and open boxes hold candy sold one piece at a time, a licorice whip, a wax bottle, a paper strip of little sugar dots. You clutch a nickel in a warm fist and take your time, because a nickel here is a small fortune and every choice matters. The clerk waits patiently, dropping your picks into a tiny paper sack, never rushing you. For a few cents you could walk out feeling rich beyond measure. That kind of small, complete happiness is a childhood treasure now. The counter is built at just the right height for a child, as if the whole store understood that this corner belonged to you. The jars catch the light, filled with colour, the peppermints and the lemon drops and the little chocolate coins wrapped in gold foil. The open boxes hold penny candies of every kind, and each one costs so little that a nickel becomes a great sum to be spent with the utmost care, weighed and considered as gravely as any grown-up's purchase. And so you deliberate. This is not a decision to be made in haste. 5 whole cents means 5 whole pieces at a penny each, or fewer of the finer things, and the arithmetic of pleasure must be worked out with real seriousness. Do you spend it all on the licorice you love, or spread it across 5 different kinds to taste them all? Do you save a penny for tomorrow, or splurge the entire nickel today? These are weighty matters, and you give them their due. The clerk understands and does not hurry you. He has served 1,000 children at this counter, and he knows that choosing is half the fun, that the slow, sweet agony of decision is part of what the nickel buys. He waits, patient as anything, while you point and reconsider and point again, and one by one he drops your choices into a little paper sack no bigger than your hand. There is no line of impatient grown-ups sighing behind you. There is only you and the candy, and time enough to choose well. When at last the choosing is done and the nickel has passed across the counter, you hold the little sack as if it held treasure, because it does. You do not tear into it at once. You make it last, drawing out one piece at a time on the way home, savouring each one, because you know precisely how much it cost and how long you will have to wait for the next nickel to come your way. Scarcity, it turns out, is the finest seasoning there is, and it makes each small candy taste like more than it could ever be worth. There is a completeness to this happiness that is hard to find later in life. For the price of a nickel you are entirely perfectly content. You want for nothing in this moment. The whole bright world has narrowed to the sweetness in your mouth and the small sack in your hand, and it is enough. More than enough. It is everything. That is a kind of joy that a child feels fully and an adult spends the rest of life trying to recall. It taught you things too, this counter, though you did not know you were learning. It taught you the value of money, real and concrete, a nickel that could be one thing or another, but not both, a choice with a cost. It taught you patience and thrift and the pleasure of making a small thing last. It taught you that happiness need not be large or expensive, that a penny's worth of candy, chosen with care and savoured slowly, could fill you right up to the brim. We have made candy cheap and abundant now, sold in great bags at every register, more than any child could want, so much that it hardly feels like a treat at all, and in making it plentiful we have quietly stolen something from it. When a child can have a whole bag whenever they like, no single piece can mean what 1 penny candy meant, chosen from a glass jar with a fistful of coins, rare and dear and utterly complete. So you leave the counter clutching your little sack, feeling like the richest child in town, the whole day sweetened by 5 cents wisely spent. It was such a tiny sum, a nickel, and it bought a happiness so pure and so complete that grown men and women decades later still remember exactly how the licorice tasted and exactly how it felt to be a child at that counter, with a nickel in their fist and all the time in the world to choose. Now drift toward the deli case, cool and gleaming, where the slicer hums and the smell of smoked meats and sharp cheese hangs pleasantly in the air. You point to what you want, and the man behind the counter slices it fresh while you watch, laying each piece down as thin or thick as your mother asks. He weighs it, folds it into waxed paper, seals it with a strip of tape, and marks it with the price. Nothing sat behind plastic for days. It was cut for you in that moment, and it went straight from his hands to yours. The case is a small museum of good things, laid out behind the glass in orderly rows. There are the long loaves of bologna, and the deep red rounds of salami, the pale wheels of cheese and the hams glistening faintly under the light. Each one waits whole and uncut, ready to be sliced only when someone asks, so that nothing dries out or goes stale on a shelf. What you take home was a solid piece just moments before, kept fresh by the simple fact that it was not cut until you wanted it. The slicer is the heart of the counter, a gleaming machine with a round blade that spins with a low steady hum. The man sets the loaf against it and works it back and forth, and the slices fall away one after another, and he catches them and lays them down in a neat overlapping fan. He watches your mother's face and adjusts to her wishes, thinner for sandwiches, thicker for a plate of cold cuts, exactly as she likes it, because the thickness is hers to choose, and he is happy to oblige. There is a small pleasure in watching the count, too. Your mother says how much she needs, and the man slices until the scale reads right, and if it comes out a hair over, he asks whether that is all right rather than simply charging you for it. Nothing is pre-portioned into rigid packages that force you to buy more than you want. You get precisely the amount you asked for, weighed in front of you, priced by the pound, honest and exact. Then comes the wrapping, done with the same care the butcher gives his parcels. A sheet of waxed paper is pulled from the roll, the meat or cheese laid in the centre, and the whole thing folded up snug and sealed with a strip of tape. He grease pencils the price on the outside and slides it across the glass to you, and it goes into your bag still cool, wrapped in paper that breathes, the way good food ought to be kept. And often, if you are a child standing quietly by while your mother orders, the man will slice off an extra piece and hand it across the counter to you, a slice of bologna or a corner of cheese just because. It is a small kindness, unasked for, the sort of thing that made the deli counter a place a child looked forward to, and it left you with the sense once again that this was a store full of people who wished you well. The freshness of it all is the thing we've quietly traded away, because nothing was sliced until it was wanted, Everything tasted as it should. The meat moist, the cheese soft, none of it sitting sealed and sweating behind plastic for days on end. The wax paper let it breathe on the short trip home, and it reached your kitchen as fresh as it had been in the case. You knew, without having to wonder, that it had been whole and cool an hour before. Now the deli meats wait in the case pre-sliced and sealed in tight plastic, weighed and priced by machines in some back room, cut who knows when by hands you will never see. It is quick, and you need not wait your turn or speak to anyone, and there is a convenience in that. But there is no man at the slicer adjusting the thickness to your liking, no scale to watch, no extra slice handed to a waiting child, no waxed paper folded with care. The freshness and the friendliness have both been sealed away. Because the old deli counter was, like so much of that store, as much about the person as the product. It was a place where you spoke and were answered, where your preferences mattered and were met, where a stranger behind the glass treated your small order as worth doing right. The waxed paper parcel carried more than cold cuts. It carried the proof that someone had cut it fresh, just for you, in that very moment, and cared to do it well. So you take your neat waxed paper bundle, cool against your hand, the price marked plain on the outside, and you add it to the bag among the rest. It was such a simple thing, a few slices of bologna cut to order. And it held, folded up inside that humble paper, a freshness and a kindness that no sealed package has ever quite managed to keep. Somewhere near the front of the store stands the big red coffee grinder, and it is one of the best smells in the whole place. You scoop your beans from the bin, pour them into the top, and the machine roars to life, filling the air with a rich, dark warmth that follows you all the way home. You choose the grind by turning a dial, fine or coarse, and catch the fresh grounds in a bag as they tumble out. There was a small ceremony to it. Coffee was not something that simply appeared in a sealed tin. It was made, right there, just for your kitchen. The bins of beans sit in a row, and you can lift the lids and look at them dark and glossy, and breathe in that deep roasted smell before you've bought a single ounce. Your mother knows which she wants, the blend the family has drunk for years, and she scoops it out herself into the machine's hopper, measuring by eye the way she measures everything, with the confidence of long practice. There is a pride in choosing your own coffee this way, in handling the beans, in knowing exactly what is going home with you. Then the grinder does its work, and what work it is. The machine shudders and hums, the beans rattling down into the blades, and out of it pours a smell so rich and so full that it seems to fill the whole front of the store. Everyone nearby lifts their head a little. It is the smell of mornings to come, of the pot on the stove, of your father at the kitchen table with the newspaper, and it clings to the paper bag and rides home with you in the car, sweetening the whole drive. The dial lets you choose the grind to suit your pot, and your mother sets it just so, because she knows how she brews and what her coffee wants. Fine for one method, coarser for another, the choice hers to make, the coffee tailored to her own kitchen. There is a care in that, a sense that the coffee is not one uniform thing sold the same to everyone but a small custom order, ground to your family's liking while you stand and wait. And you do wait, and the waiting is part of it. You stand by the machine while it runs, watching the grounds fill the bag, and there is no impatience in it, only the small pleasure of watching something be made for you. In a minute or two it is done, the bag full and warm and fragrant, and you fold the top down and carry it off, and the smell trails behind you like something alive. There was a freshness to coffee bought this way that no sealed tin could match. Ground the moment before you took it home, it kept all its flavour and all its perfume, and the first pot brewed from it filled the house with a richness that store-ground coffee, sitting in its can for who knows how long, could never quite manage. You tasted the difference every morning, even if you never put words to it. We have made coffee endlessly convenient now, sold pre-ground and sealed, or sealed in little pods, or brewed for us at a counter by a stranger, and there is a great ease in that. But we have lost the ceremony. We have lost the bins you could open and smell, the scoop in your own hand, the roar of the grinder, and the warm, fragrant bag carried home. Coffee became a product to be grabbed rather than a small ritual to be performed, and something companionable went out of it in the change. Because that grinder made an ordinary purchase into a moment. It engaged your senses, your smell and your sight and your hearing, and it put the making of the thing right there in front of you, done at your request, to your liking. It reminded you that coffee came from somewhere, that it was beans before it was grounds, that a person and a machine had to work to ready it for your pot. Nothing was hidden, everything was near, and it filled the store with that smell, which is perhaps its greatest gift. Ask anyone who shopped in those days what the grocery store smelled like, and the coffee grinder will be near the top of the list, that deep, warm, roasted richness drifting through the aisles. It was part of the character of the place, part of what made walking through the door a small pleasure, part of the sensory memory that lingers long after the store itself is gone. So you carry off your warm bag of fresh grounds, the smell of it filling the car, the promise of tomorrow's coffee already sweetening the ride home. It was such a small thing, grinding your own beans by the door, and it turned a can of coffee into something made, something fresh, something ground just for your kitchen while you stood and breathed it in. That is a richness we have quietly traded for a sealed lid and a longer shelf, and it is worth remembering how good it smelled. Over in the corner, half forgotten, sits a wooden barrel of pickles floating in brine, and beside it, maybe a bin of crackers or a barrel of loose beans. You fish out a pickle with the tongs, dripping and enormous, and it goes into a little paper sack to eat before you even reach the car. Nothing here is portioned out in a factory. You take what you need, scooped and weighed and wrapped, no more and no less. There is a plainness to it, an honesty, that the tidy sealed packages of today have quietly traded away. The barrel is a heavy wooden thing, its staves dark with age, and lifting the lid releases a sharp vinegary tang that makes your mouth water on the spot. Inside, the pickles bob in their cloudy brine, whole and green and enormous, and the tongs hang on the rim ready for you to go fishing. There is a small adventure in it, choosing your pickle from among the crowd, working the tongs until you have hold of a good one, hauling it up dripping into the light. Nearby stand the other barrels and bins, the loose crackers you scoop into a bag, the dried beans you ladle out by the pound, perhaps flour or sugar or oats, sold the same way, out of the open barrel and into whatever amount you please. This is buying in bulk in the truest sense. Not great warehouse quantities, but exactly the amount you want, measured out fresh, from a barrel that has served the whole neighbourhood the same way for years. The beauty of it is the freedom. You're not forced to buy a fixed package, a set weight decided by some distant factory whether it suits your household or not. You take a handful or a pound or a barrelful as your family needs, and pay for just that. A widow buying for one need not haul home more than she can use. A big family can scoop out plenty. The barrel bends to your needs rather than forcing your needs to bend to it. and it is fresh, kept in the open air rather than sealed in plastic, dipped into daily so that nothing sits stale for long. The crackers are crisp, the beans sound, the pickles snapping with brine. The grocer keeps the barrels clean and the stock turning, because his name is on it and his neighbours are eating it. And so what you scoop out is good, dependably good, week after week. There is a small sociability to the barrels too. They sit out where everyone gathers, and folks pause there and chat while they scoop and weigh, and a child sent for crackers might linger over the pickle barrel a while, and the corner becomes a little meeting place. It is the opposite of the sealed aisle you hurry down alone. It draws people together around the plain shared business of taking what they need from the common barrel. You pay by weight, scooped and weighed on the scale in plain sight, and there is an honesty in that too. What you take is measured before your eyes and priced by the pound. No hidden packaging, no paying for air and cardboard, just the plain goods weighed out fair. You could see exactly what you were getting and exactly what it cost, with nothing between you and the food but a scoop and a scale. We have sealed nearly everything away now, into rigid packages of fixed size, wrapped and boxed and shrink-filmed, and there is a cleanliness and a convenience to it that no one would wholly wish away. But we have lost the barrel, and with it the freedom to take just what we need, the freshness of the open air, the small adventure of fishing out your own pickle, the plainness and honesty of goods weighed out fair before your eyes. Everything is portioned for us now, and in the portioning we lost a kind of trust, because the barrel treated you as capable, as a person who knew how much your own family needed and could measure it out for yourself. It did not decide for you, or package your choices into tidy predetermined units. It simply held the goods, plain and fresh and open, and let you take your fill and pay your fair weight. An arrangement so simple and so honest that it seems almost radical now. So you drop your dripping pickle into its little sack, already planning to eat it before the car even leaves the lot, the brine sharp and cold and wonderful. It was such a humble thing, a barrel of pickles in the corner, and it held a whole plainer way of buying, fresh and free and honest, where you took what you needed and no more, and paid for just that, and trusted your own two hands to measure out your share. Gather up the empties before you go, because in the 1960s glass did not simply get thrown away. Soda bottles and milk bottles carried a deposit, a few cents apiece, and you brought them back washed and lined up in their crate. The clerk counted them, handed over your coins, and off the bottles went to be cleaned and filled and sold again. For a child, collecting bottles along the roadside was pocket money waiting to be claimed. Nothing was disposable. Everything came back around. It was thrift and care woven so tightly into daily life that no one even called it that. The bottles themselves were made to last. Thick, heavy glass built to be filled and drunk and returned and filled again, dozens of times over. There was a solidity to a glass soda bottle, a real weight in the hand, and a coldness to it fresh from the cooler that no thin can or plastic bottle has ever matched. You drank from it knowing it would go back, that this same bottle would be washed and filled and handed to another child down the road, and there was a rightness in that you felt without thinking about it. At home the empties gathered by the back door rinsed and set in their wooden crate, waiting for the next trip to the store. Returning them was simply part of the errand, as natural as bringing the list. You carried the crate in, clinking, and set it on the counter, and the clerk counted the bottles and counted out your deposit in coins, and the money came back to the family to be spent again. The bottle you paid a few cents to hold, you got those cents back the moment you returned it. For a child, this was nothing short of a small economy. bottles were everywhere, tossed in ditches, left on benches, forgotten in the park, and every one of them was worth a coin at the store, so you kept an eye out. You gathered them on the walk home, hauled them in a wagon, redeemed them at the counter, and the pennies added up to real money, to penny candy and matinee tickets and small treasures. The world was scattered with pocket money for any child willing to stoop and collect it. And the bottles went back into the world, washed and refilled again and again. Nothing was used once and discarded. The whole system turned in a circle, the bottle travelling out full and coming back empty and going out full once more endlessly, and no mountain of waste piled up behind it. It was a way of living lightly on the earth that no one thought to praise or even name, because it was simply how things were done. This thrift ran all through those days, this instinct against waste, and the bottle was only its most visible sign. A generation that had known the Depression and the rationing of the war did not throw things away lightly. They saved, they reused, they returned, they mended. The returnable bottle fit into a whole way of life built on the plain conviction that goods were precious and waste was a small sin, and that everything possible ought to be used again. We have gone the other way entirely into a world of the disposable, where bottles and cans are used once and cast off, where packaging is designed to be thrown away, where the very idea of returning a container for coins seems quaint. It is convenient beyond measure, this throwaway world. But it has buried us in waste, and it has dulled something in us, some instinct of care and thrift that the returnable bottle kept alive in every household as a matter of course. There was dignity in that old thrift and a kind of respect for the goods and for the earth and for the money itself. To return a bottle was to acknowledge that it had worth beyond a single use, that it deserved to be washed and filled again, that waste was not to be indulged. A child learned this by collecting bottles for coins, learned it in the hands and the pocket, and carried the lesson for life. So you count out your empties on the counter, the coins come clinking back into your palm, and the bottles go off to be washed and filled and set out again for the next family. It was such an ordinary bit of business, returning the empties. And it held a whole ethic of care and thrift, a world that used things again rather than throwing them away, that turned in a patient circle and left no mountain of waste behind. We might do well to remember how naturally it came to them, and how little they thought of it. Now to the produce, piled loose and unwrapped in wooden crates and open bins. The apples still wear a little dust from the orchard. The corn is in season because it is the only time you will find it. You choose each piece by hand, feeling for ripeness, and carry your selections to the big hanging scale with its swinging brass pan and its needle that quivers and settles. The grocer reads the weight, works out the price in his head, and marks the bag. There were no year-round strawberries flown in from across the world. You ate what the season offered, and it tasted like it. The produce sits out in the open, unwrapped and unwashed, still carrying a little of the field it came from. The potatoes wear their dirt. The apples have a natural dullness to their skins that no waxing has polished away. You can smell the ripe tomatoes from a few steps off, that green, earthy sweetness, and the whole corner is alive with the plain, honest look and smell of things grown in the ground and picked not long ago. Choosing is done by hand, and it is a skill your mother has and is teaching you without ever saying so. She lifts each apple and turns it, checking for bruises, feeling its weight. She presses a thumb gently to a peach to test its give. She peels back a corn husk to see the kernels beneath. She knows what ripeness feels like, what a good melon sounds like when you thump it, and she chooses each piece deliberately, the best of what the bins offer, rejecting the soft and the spotted with a practiced eye. The seasons rule this corner absolutely. In summer the bins overflow with corn and tomatoes and berries, and in autumn with apples and squash and pumpkins, and in the lean months the choice is narrow to what keeps and what ships. You cannot have strawberries in January, you cannot have sweet corn in the spring, and so you learn the year by what the produce offers. Learn to long for the first strawberries and to feast on them while they last, because you know they will be gone with the season. And because everything is in season and picked nearby, it tastes as it should. The summer tomato is a thing of glory, sweet and sun-warm. Nothing like the pale, hard tomatoes of the cold months. The first sweet corn of the year is an event worth a whole supper. You eat these things at their peak because that is the only time you can have them, and the waiting all year makes the taste 100 times sweeter when at last it comes. Then to the scale, that grand old instrument hanging from the ceiling, its brass pan swinging gently, its needle waiting. You set your produce in the pan, and the needle swings up and quivers and settles, and the grocer reads the weight and works the price in his head, quick as anything, and marks it on the bag. You watch the whole thing, the weighing plain and open, the arithmetic done by a man who has done it 10,000 times and never needs a machine. We have conquered the seasons now, and it is a marvel, truly. Strawberries in January, sweet corn in spring, any fruit from any corner of the earth on any day of the year, flown in and waxed and wrapped and waiting. There is an abundance in it the old grocer could scarcely have dreamed, but something has been lost in the conquering. The fruit that travels half the world arrives handsome and tasteless, picked green to survive the journey, and we've forgotten what a tomato in season truly tastes like. And we have lost the longing, which was its own quiet pleasure. When you could only have strawberries in their season, you waited for them, and the waiting sharpened the joy, and the first bowl of them each year was a small celebration. Now that we can have them always, they mean nothing, another item on the shelf. And the year has lost the sweet rhythm of things awaited and things enjoyed and things missed until they came round again. The loose unwrapped produce also asked something of you and gave something back. It asked you to choose, to handle, to judge ripeness with your own hands, and in the asking it taught you, made you a knowing shopper, connected you to the food and the field it came from. The wrapped and waxed produce of today asks nothing and teaches nothing, and we take it without a thought, and we're a little poorer for the ease. So you carry your loose produce to the hanging scale, the needle swinging up and settling, the grocer marking your bag, the summer tomatoes sweet and warm in their sack. It was such a plain thing, weighing fruit by hand, and it held a whole seasoned way of eating, in tune with the year, connected to the field, where the first strawberries were a joy worth waiting for, and a tomato in August tasted like the sun. Before the store even opens, some of your groceries have already arrived. Step out onto the porch in the cool of the morning, and there they are, glass bottles of milk left by the milkman in the quiet before dawn, the cream risen thick at the top of each one. You bring them in cold and heavy, and you leave the empties out with a note tucked in the neck if you need something extra. He knew your order, your family's size, the week you had guests coming. It was a kind of gentle, dependable service that simply came to your door, no app required. The milkman came in the dark before the household stirred, his truck humming softly down the still street, and he set the bottles on the step so quietly that you never heard him. By the time you woke, the milk was already there, cold from the truck. The cream floated to the top in a pale plug beneath the cardboard cap. There was a small magic in it. This delivery accomplished while you slept. The day's milk simply present on the porch as if the morning itself had provided it. You brought the bottles in, and they were heavy and cold in your hands, beaded with dew, and you set them in the icebox where they belonged. The cream on top was a prize, poured off for coffee or shaken back into the milk, and a child might beg for the first pour of it, thick and rich. This was milk as milk had always been, whole and fresh and separated by nothing but gravity, and it tasted of the dairy it came from in a way that homogenized cartons never quite do. The milkman knew your family the way the grocer did, knew how much milk a household your size went through, knew to leave extra when company was coming, knew the week you ran low and the week you were away. His route was a web of such knowledge, every house on it a set of habits and needs he carried in his head, and he served each one accordingly, adjusting without being asked, a quiet steward of the neighbourhood's breakfast tables. And you could ask him for more with nothing but a note. You tucked a scrap of paper in the neck of an empty bottle, a request for extra milk or a pound of butter or a dozen eggs, and set it out on the step, and the next morning there it was, delivered as asked. It was ordering without a word spoken, a silent conversation carried out in notes and bottles, dependable as the sunrise, and it worked because a real person read your note and remembered you. The empties went back out on the step, rinsed and ready, and the milkman gathered them to be washed and filled again. The same circle of thrift and reuse that governed the soda bottles at the store. Nothing was thrown away. The heavy glass bottle went back and forth, house to dairy to house, for years, and the whole arrangement turned in its patient loop, feeding the family and wasting nothing. There was a security in it, a sense of being provided for that is hard to describe to anyone who never knew it. You did not have to think about the milk. It simply came faithfully, morning after morning, set on your step by a man who knew your name and your needs, whether you were awake or not, whether the weather was fair or foul. It was one less thing to worry over, one steady certainty in the household, the milk on the step at dawn. We have traded all of this for the convenience of the carton on the store shelf, bought by our own hand and hauled home in our own arms, and there is no arguing the ease of buying our milk when and where we like. But we have lost the milkman, and with him a whole small kindness, the delivery in the quiet dark, the cold heavy bottles on the step, the cream on top, the note tucked in the neck, the sense of a neighbour providing for your table while you slept. And we have lost the person, which is the deepest loss of all. The milkman was a fixture, a familiar face on the route, a man who greeted the early risers and watched the neighbourhood's children grow and knew every family he served. He was woven into the life of the street, another of those steady, half-invisible figures who made a neighbourhood feel tended and known. When the routes ended, a thread of that connection was quietly cut. So you gather the cold bottles from the step, the cream thick at the top, and carry them into the icebox as the household begins to stir. It was such an ordinary thing, milk on the doorstep at dawn, and it held a gentle, faithful care, a neighbour providing while you slept, a service that knew your name and your needs and asked nothing but an empty bottle and a note. It simply came, morning after morning, and we did not know to be grateful until it was gone. Some mornings you never leave the house at all. Your mother picks up the telephone, asks for the grocer by name, and reads him her list right down the line. A dozen eggs, a sack of flour, a good chicken for supper. He writes it all down, gathers it himself, and sends it out to you, boxed and carried right into the kitchen. There was no minimum order, no service fee, No stranger you would never see again. It was your grocer, doing a neighbourly favour, keeping a family fed. Convenience used to have a familiar face and a voice you recognised. The call itself was a friendly thing, not a transaction fed into a machine. Your mother knew the grocer's voice and he knew hers, and there were a few words exchanged before the list even began, about the weather or a shared acquaintance or how the family was keeping. Then she read out her needs, and he wrote them down in his own hand, and if she was unsure about something he told her plainly, the same good advice he would have given across the counter, only now delivered down the wire. He gathered the order himself or set the stock boy to it, walking the aisles of his own store with your list in hand, choosing the goods the way he would choose them for anyone he cared about. He picked the good chicken, the fresh eggs, the flour not too near its date. Because he knew you, because your name was on the order, he took the same care he would have taken had you been standing right there watching, and perhaps a little more. Then the order was boxed and sent out, carried to your door by the delivery boy, brought right into the kitchen and set on the table. There was no leaving it on the step to be fetched, no signature on a screen, no stranger dropping a bag and hurrying off. It was a neighbour's son you likely knew, who carried the box in and set it down and passed a friendly word, part of the same web of familiar faces that made the whole enterprise feel like being looked after rather than merely served. And there was no charge for the kindness, or next to none. No minimum order that forced you to buy more than you needed, no service fee tacked on, no tipping through an app to a driver you would never meet. It was simply part of what the grocer did, a courtesy extended to good customers, a way of keeping the neighbourhood fed and the store's regulars loyal. The service was woven into the relationship, offered freely, the way you might do a favour for a friend. This mattered most, of course, for those who could not easily get to the store, the elderly, the housebound, the mother with a sick child and no way to leave. For them, the grocer's telephone and delivery boy were a lifeline, a way to keep the pantry stocked when getting out was hard or impossible, and the grocer knew who these customers were and watched out for them, and would notice if a regular order stopped coming and think to check that all was well. The service was also a kind of care. We have rebuilt all of this now, grander and faster and more efficient than the old grocer could have imagined, with apps and drivers and vast warehouses, groceries summoned to the door in an hour by a tap on a screen. And it is a genuine marvel and a genuine convenience, and no one would truly wish to give it up. But the face has gone out of it. The voice you recognised is now a screen. The neighbour's son is now a stranger you will never see again. The kindness has become a service, priced and feed and optimised. Because the old way was personal in a way the new way cannot be. It ran on relationship, on the grocer knowing your family and caring how you fared. He was not filling an anonymous order pulled from a queue. He was helping the family down the street, people he knew and saw at church and would answer to if the chicken were poor. That knowing, that accountability, that care cannot be built into an app, however clever, because it grew out of a whole life shared in a small place. So the box arrives at your kitchen table, the good chicken and the fresh eggs and the flour, gathered by a grocer who knew your name and carried in by a boy you recognised. It was such a simple convenience, phoning in your list, and it wore a familiar face and spoke in a familiar voice, and it kept the neighbourhood fed as a neighbourly favour rather than a feed service. And that human warmth is the very thing our marvellous new ease has not managed to keep. Follow the warm smell toward the bakery counter, where the loaves sit out on wooden racks still giving off heat. You buy a loaf unsliced, or ask them to run it through the slicer while you wait, and it goes home in a simple paper sleeve that does nothing to hide the smell. By the time you reach the kitchen, half the crust has mysteriously vanished and no one confesses. Bread was not a shelf-stable brick wrapped in crinkling plastic. It was baked that morning, meant for that day, and it filled the whole car with the smell of something good and simple. The smell reaches you before the counter does, that deep yeasty warmth of bread fresh from the oven, and you follow it the way anyone would, drawn in by one of the oldest and best smells there is. The loaves sit out on their racks, golden crusted and still warm, and the rolls and the pies and the coffee cakes beside them, and the whole corner is wrapped in that fragrance that says home and comfort and morning all at once. You could buy your bread unsliced, a whole warm loaf to carry home and cut yourself at the kitchen table, the first slice steaming, the crust crackling under the knife. Or you could ask them to run it through the slicer there at the counter and watch it come out in neat even slices, still warm, and slide it into its paper sleeve. Either way, it was bread as bread should be, baked that morning, meant to be eaten that day, nothing added to make it last for weeks on a shelf. The paper sleeve did nothing to trap the smell, and so the bread perfumed the whole trip home, filling the car with that warm fragrance until the temptation grew unbearable. And somewhere between the store and the kitchen, the heel of the loaf would go missing, torn off and eaten warm in the back seat by a child who could not resist, and no one would confess, and no one really minded, because who could blame anyone for such a thing with that smell filling the car? This was bread meant for the day, and that was its glory and its only drawback. It went stale by the second day and hard by the third, because nothing had been put in it to keep it soft, and so you bought it fresh and often, and ate it while it was good. There was no month-old loaf sitting soft and strange in its plastic bag. What you had was real bread, honest bread, wonderful the day you bought it, and if it did not last, well, that was simply the price of it being real. The bakery counter, like the butcher's and the deli's, was a place of people and craft. Someone had risen in the dark to bake those loaves, had mixed and kneaded and shaped and watched the ovens, and the result sat out warm for you to choose. You could ask the baker about the day's loaves, which were freshest, what had just come out. There was a person behind the bread, a craft behind it, and you could taste the difference that made in every slice. We have made bread last forever now, sealed in plastic, softened with additives, sliced by machine, sitting for weeks on the shelf and staying soft the whole time in a way real bread never could. And there is a convenience in it, a loaf that keeps, that does not go stale in a day, that waits for you whenever you want it. But it is not quite the same thing anymore. It is bread that has traded its soul for its shelf life, soft and uniform and faintly strange, nothing like the warm, fragrant loaf from the bakery rack. And we have lost the smell, which is no small loss. The bakery counter filled the grocery store with a fragrance that no sealed plastic bag can release, and it filled the car and then the kitchen, and it was part of the deep sensory memory of those days, part of what made the store and the home feel warm and alive. Ask anyone who remembers, and the smell of the bread will be there, warm and yeasty and gone. So you carry your warm loaf home in its paper sleeve, the smell filling the car, the heel already mysteriously missing, the promise of fresh bread with supper riding along beside you. It was such a plain thing, a loaf of bread baked that morning. And it held a warmth and a fragrance, and an honest goodness that our long-lasting plastic-wrapped, machine-sliced bread has quietly given up, and it filled the whole car with the smell of something simple and good, meant to be eaten while it was fresh, and loved all the more for not lasting. Now to the newest corner of the store, where a low humming case glows with a kind of modern magic. Frozen foods are still a marvel here. The frozen vegetables, the frozen fish, and most astonishing of all, the complete frozen dinner on its little metal tray. Your mother lifts one and turns it over, half impressed and half unsure, wondering whether supper really can come out of a freezer and taste like anything at all. It felt like the future had arrived in the grocery store. What seemed like a small miracle then is so ordinary now that we hardly glance at it. The frozen case was newer than much of the store, a gleaming addition, its glass fogged with cold and its interior lit up like something from a magazine spread about the world to come. You could feel the chill rolling off it, and inside sat the frozen goods stacked in their bright boxes, vegetables and fish and juices, and most wondrous of all, whole meals ready to be heated, a novelty that seemed almost too clever to be true. The frozen dinner in particular was a marvel your mother regarded with real ambivalence. There it was on its metal tray, the meat in one compartment, the vegetable in another, the potatoes in a third, a whole supper frozen solid and waiting, needing only the oven to bring it to life. It promised something extraordinary, a hot meal with almost no work, and a part of her was intrigued. But another part, the part raised on cooking everything from scratch, was not at all sure that supper from a freezer could be trusted to taste like supper at all, because this was new, genuinely new, in a way it is hard for us to feel now. For generations, food had come fresh and been cooked at once, and the idea that you could freeze a whole meal and keep it for weeks and thaw it back to life was close to science fiction. The freezer aisle glowed with the promise of the modern age, of convenience and ease and a future where the drudgery of daily cooking might be lifted. It felt like progress you could hold in your hand. And it was progress of a kind, and it would change how families ate more than anyone standing at that case could have guessed. The frozen dinner and its cousins would grow from novelty to staple, would reshape the American supper table, would give the busy and the tired a way to feed a family without an evening at the stove. Your mother, turning that tray over in her hands, was holding the small beginning of an enormous change, though she could not have known it. There was wonder in it then, real wonder, the kind we have almost entirely lost. The frozen case was a glimpse of the future arrived early, a marvel worth pausing over, worth turning the box over and reading twice, worth talking about with a neighbour. To shop was to encounter now and then some genuine novelty, some new thing that made you stop and marvel, and the freezer aisle was full of exactly that. We've made the frozen meal so ordinary that we cannot even see it anymore. The freezer aisles stretch on for yards, packed with 1,000 frozen dinners and pizzas and vegetables and desserts, and we walk past them without a glance, taking utterly for granted a convenience that struck our grandmothers as close to miraculous. The wonder has worn off completely, buried under abundance and familiarity, and we have forgotten it was ever wonderful at all. And that is perhaps the strangest thing of all to sit with, how quickly the miraculous becomes the mundane. Your mother stood at that case genuinely uncertain whether a meal could come from a freezer, and now her great-grandchildren pull frozen dinners from the case without a thought, as ordinary as bread. The marvel of one generation is the furniture of the next, unremarked, unremarkable, its wonder entirely spent. There is something worth remembering in that first ambivalence, though, that pause before the new. Your mother was not wrong to wonder whether the frozen dinner would taste like anything, was not wrong to weigh the ease against what might be lost. Every convenience carries a small trade, and she felt it standing there, the promise of easy suppers against the goodness of food cooked fresh. And she was wise to feel it, even as the future advanced, whether she embraced it or not. So she sets the frozen tray back, or perhaps she takes it, curious, willing to try the future once, and moves on down the aisle. It was such a small thing, a frozen dinner in a glowing case, and it was a genuine marvel once, a glimpse of the world to come, regarded with wonder and a wise pinch of doubt before abundance made it invisible. We hardly glance at it now, but someone's grandmother once turned it over in her hands and marvelled, and it is worth remembering that we did. Back at the front, watch the clerk at the register, fingers flying over the keys, punching in each price by memory and by the mark on every item. There is no beep, no glowing screen, no scanner reading a code in a flash of red. Instead, there is that wonderful mechanical ring, the drawer flying open with a bright chime, the numbers popping up in the little window. Every total was tallied by a real person paying attention. It was slower, yes, but there was something satisfying in that sound. The honest music of a day's shopping being added up right in front of you. The register itself was a grand machine, heavy and ornate, all polished metal and rows of keys, a proper piece of equipment that looked built to last a lifetime and probably was. The clerk stood before it with the ease of the long practice, and there was a real skill in the work, reading each hand-marked price and finding the right keys and punching them in swift and sure, item after item without a scanner to do the reading or a screen to do the thinking. And the sounds it made were half the pleasure. Each key struck with a solid mechanical clack. The numbers sprang up in the little glass window at the top, white on black, tallying as they went. And then, at the end, the total rang up with that bright, unmistakable chime, and the drawer flew open with a chunk and a rattle of coins, and the whole thing had a music to it, a rhythm and a sound that meant a purchase completed, money exchanged, business honestly done. The clerk did real arithmetic too, at least at the finish, making change in the head and counting it back into your palm, coin by coin, bill by bill, saying the amounts aloud as the money went back to you. There was a competence in it, a small mastery, the mental math done quick and sure, the change counted back the proper way so you could follow along and know it was right. It asked something of the clerk, this work, and the good ones took a quiet pride in doing it well. You could follow the whole thing, and that was part of its virtue. You watched the prices go in, watched the numbers climb in the little window, watched the total ring up, and the change come back. Nothing was hidden inside a machine you could not see. The adding was done in the open, by a person, in a way you could check and understand, and there was a transparency in that, a plain honesty that the sealed scanning of today does not quite offer. It was slower, there is no denying it. Each item punched in by hand took longer than a scanner's instant beep, and the line moved at a human pace, and you waited your turn while the clerk worked through the order ahead of you. But the slowness was not all loss. It left room for a word with the clerk, a moment of human contact, an unhurried close to the errand, and there was something civilized in a pace set by people rather than machines. We have made the checkout nearly instant now, and nearly silent, and increasingly without any person at all. The scanner reads the code in a flash, the screen does the thinking, the total appears without a human hand or head involved, and at the self-checkout there is no clerk at all, only you and a machine and its flat-recorded voice. It is fast beyond anything the old register could manage, but the music has gone out of it, and the person and the plain visible honesty of a total added up before your eyes, because that old register, for all its slowness, was a human instrument, played by a person with real skill, its every step visible and understandable, Its sounds a satisfying music that meant something. It made the close of the errand a small human moment, a bit of contact and competence and honest reckoning, rather than a silent transaction with a machine. The ring of it, the chime of the drawer, the change counted into your palm, these were the sounds of a purchase made among people. So the clerk rings up your total, the numbers spring up in the little window, the drawer flies open with its bright chime, and your change is counted back into your hand coin by coin. It was such an ordinary sound, a cash register ringing up a sale, and it was the honest music of the errand's end, tallied by a real person in plain sight, slower than a scanner but warmer, a small human close to the morning's shopping, and it is worth remembering how good that ring once sounded. When it is time to settle up, notice how it is done. Your mother opens a checkbook and writes out the amount in her steady hand, or she counts coins from a change purse, a dime, 2 nickels, the pennies pressed one by one into the clerk's palm. There is no card to tap, no machine to wait on. The whole exchange happens between 2 people, unhurried, honest, exact. Money had weight then. You felt it leave your hand, and you knew what it was worth. Paying was a small human moment, not a swipe you barely register. The checkbook came out of the purse and your mother wrote in it carefully, the date, the store, the amount in numbers and then again in her steady script, and she signed it and tore it out and handed it across. It was a small formal act, writing a cheque, a promise put down in ink, and it required attention and care. And she noted it in the register at the back, subtracting it from the balance then and there, keeping her own running account of what the household had and what it had spent. Or she paid in cash, and that was more concrete still, the coins counted out from the change purse into the clerk's waiting palm. A dime, 2 nickels, the pennies pressed in one at a time until the amount was exact. You watched the money leave her hand, watched it pass to the clerk, felt in the very act of it the weight and reality of what was being spent. Money was physical then, something you held and counted and handed over, and you felt each transaction in a way a tap can never quite deliver. Because the money was real in your hand, you knew what things cost in a way that is harder now. $1 was a thing you held and spent and watched go, and so you felt its going and you knew when it was gone. The household budget was a matter of cash in a purse and figures in a checkbook register, tangible and immediate, and you managed it by feel and by sight, knowing always more or less what you had because you could count it. And the paying was slow and personal, a small exchange between 2 people who often knew each other. The cheque written and handed over, the coins counted out, the change made and counted back, all of it done unhurried, face to face, with a word or 2 passed along the way. It was a human close to the transaction, the last of the many small human contacts that made up a trip to the store, money passing from one known hand to another. There was a discipline in it too, that the physical handling of money quietly taught. When you paid in cash and watched your bills and coins dwindle, you knew when to stop, felt the limit in your emptying purse, could not spend what you did not have, because you could see plainly that you did not have it. The checkbook, balanced faithfully, did the same, kept you honest with yourself about what remained. Money you could touch was money you could not so easily overspend. We have made paying nearly frictionless now, a card tapped against a reader, a phone waved over a screen, the money moving invisibly from an account you cannot see to another you will never think about. It is fast, and it is easy, and it is convenient beyond measure. But the money has become abstract, a number on a screen spent with a tap so light you barely feel it, and in losing the weight of it we have lost something of our sense of what things cost and what we have. Because when paying costs you nothing but a tap, when the money is invisible and the act is instant, it is easy to spend without feeling it, to lose track of what is going and what remains, to let the abstract numbers slip away unnoticed, the coins counted into the palm, the check written by hand, made you feel each dollar and mark its passing, and there was a wisdom in that feeling, a discipline, that the frictionless tap has quietly dissolved. So your mother writes out her check in her steady hand, or counts her coins one by one into the clerk's palm, the money real and weighted and honestly spent. It was such a plain thing, paying for the groceries, and it was a small human moment, unhurried and exact, money you could hold passing from one known hand to another, felt in the very act of it, marked in its going. We tap and barely notice now, but there was a wisdom in feeling the weight of what we spent, and it is worth remembering that we once did. Sometimes your mother hands you a note and a little money and sends you off to the counter for a pack of cigarettes, and no one thinks a thing of it. A child running that errand was simply part of ordinary life, the same as fetching bread or a bottle of pop. The clerk reads the note, takes the coins, and off you go, proud to have been trusted with a grown-up task. It is a small window into just how differently the world was arranged back then, how much has quietly changed about what we hand to children and what we ask of them. The note was written in your mother's hand, plain and unremarkable, asking the clerk for the brand your father smoked, and you carried it to the counter, clutched tight along with the coins, feeling the small weight of responsibility. The clerk read it, nodded, reached behind him for the pack and took your money, and there was nothing strange in any of it, not to him and not to you and not to anyone standing by. It was an errand like any other, and you were glad to be trusted with it. For a child, being sent on an errand of any kind was a mark of growing up, a sign that you were capable, dependable, old enough to be handed a task and money and sent off to see it done. It did not matter much what the errand was, bread or pop or cigarettes or a spool of thread. What mattered was the trust in it, the being counted on, the walking home with the task completed and the change in your fist, proud to have managed a grown-up thing. And this was a world thick with such errands, a world that sent children out and about far more freely than ours does. You walked to the store alone, ran messages between neighbours, carried notes and lists and coins, moved through the neighbourhood on your own 2 feet with a freedom and a responsibility that children now are rarely given. The errand was part of how a child grew, out in the world, trusted, useful, learning by doing the small business of daily life. The cigarettes themselves tell their own story, of course, of a time before the dangers were known or admitted, when smoking was simply everywhere, woven through daily life, ordinary as coffee. Your father smoked, and most fathers did, and mothers too, and it was no more remarkable than any other habit, sold openly and cheaply, and sent for by children without a second thought. The world had not yet learned what it would later learn, and so the errand carried no shadow, only the plain innocence of a task run for a parent. It is startling to look back on now, from a world that has learned so much and grown so careful. We would not dream of sending a child for cigarettes now, could not. The law forbids it, and our knowledge recoils from it, and rightly so. The change in that one small errand measures an enormous shift in what we know, in what we permit, in how we guard our children from harms the old world did not yet recognize. But there is something else in the memory too, beyond the cigarettes, something worth holding on to even as we are glad of what has changed. It is the trust, the freedom, the way a child was sent out into the world and counted on. That part we have lost along with the rest, and its loss is not all gain. Children now are watched and driven and guarded far more closely, kept from the small independences that once taught them capability, and something in that carefulness, wise as much of it is, has also cost them a kind of growing up, because the errand was never really about what was fetched. It was about the child being trusted, being useful, being sent out to manage a small piece of the world alone and bring it home accomplished. That trust built something in a child, a confidence, a sense of being capable and counted on, and it came from a world that let children move through it more freely than we now dare to let them. We have gained much in our caution. We have also fenced our children in, so you carry the pack home along with the change, proud of the errand run and the trust kept, thinking nothing of what it was you fetched. It was such an ordinary thing, a child sent to the counter with a note, and it opens a window onto a whole different arrangement of the world, one we're right to have changed in some ways and might mourn a little in others, a world that trusted its children with errands and sent them out into it freely, for good and for ill, in a way that is almost gone. If the store is big enough, or if the drugstore next door counts, there is a lunch counter with tall stools and a soda fountain gleaming behind it. You can slide onto a stool after the shopping is done and order a cherry Coke mix by hand, a scoop of ice cream, a grilled cheese sizzling on the flat top. The soda jerk works the fountain with the showman's flourish, and for a little while the errand becomes an outing, a treat, a place to sit and talk. Shopping and gathering and a little fun all lived under the same roof. The counter ran along one side, topped with gleaming enamel or marble, lined with tall stools that spun if you gave them a push, and behind it stood the fountain in all its glory. The taps and the spouts, the syrups in their bottles, the ice cream tubs down in the cold well. It was a bright and cheerful corner, and sliding onto a stool there was the reward at the end of the shopping, the treat that turned a chore into a pleasure and gave the family a reason to linger. The soda jerk was half server and half performer, and he worked the fountain with a practiced flourish that was part of the show. He pulled the syrup and the soda together into the glass, mixed a cherry Coke by hand with a swirl and a splash, built a sundae with layers of ice cream and sauce, scooped and poured and topped it all with a flourish, and set it before you with a flourish more. There was showmanship in it, and skill, and it made the ordering itself a small entertainment, and the food was simple and good. The grilled cheese sizzling on the flat top, the burger, the plate of fries, the sundae, the milkshake thick enough to stand a spoon in. Nothing fancy, nothing complicated, just plain good things made fresh while you watched, eaten there at the counter with the family gathered on their stools. It was the food of small pleasures, familiar and satisfying, and it tasted all the better for the outing it capped. But the food was only half of it, or less. The counter was a gathering place, a spot to sit and talk, to see who else was in, to pass the time of day with neighbours on the neighbouring stools. Teenagers gathered there after school. Families paused there after shopping. Old friends met there for a coffee and a chat. It was one of those places, now grown rare, where a community came together over small pleasures, informal and welcoming and warm. And it lived right there under the same roof as the shopping, so that the errand and the outing were one, the practical and the pleasurable joined together. You did your buying, and then you sat and had a treat. And the whole thing was a single trip, a single occasion, the necessary and the delightful woven together. There was an efficiency in that, but more than efficiency, there was a wholeness, a sense that daily life and small joys belonged together and need not be pursued in separate places. We have pulled these things apart now into their separate boxes. Shopping is one place, eating out another, gathering with friends a third, and each is pursued on its own, in its own establishment, at its own appointed time. The lunch counter that joined them all has largely vanished, and with it the easy mingling of the errand and the treat and the visit, the whole warm wholeness of a place where you could shop and eat and gather all at once. And the gathering itself has thinned. The lunch counters was a place of casual, unplanned community, where you sat among neighbours and fell into talk, where the young gathered and the old lingered and the town knitted itself together over sodas and sundaes. Such places are hard to find now, these informal crossroads, where a community simply gathered, and their loss is part of a larger thinning of the shared places where people once met, without planning to, and knew each other and belonged. Because that counter was more than a place to eat. It was a place to be together, easily, ordinarily, over small good things. And it made the grocery trip a little bit of an outing, and the neighbourhood a little bit of a community. The cherry coke mixed by hand, the grilled cheese on the flat top, the spinning stools and the showman's soda jerk, these were the props of a gathering place, and the gathering was the true treat. So you slide onto a stool when the shopping is done, order your cherry coke and watch it mixed with a flourish, and sit a while among the neighbours as the errand turns into an outing. It was such a simple pleasure, a soda fountain up front, and it joined the shopping and the treat and the visit all under one roof, a warm gathering place over small good things, and its quiet passing is part of how the shared corners of a community have thinned, and it is worth remembering how good it was to sit and spin on those stools. So here we are at the end of the day, the bags carried in, the bread half gone, the whole warm morning behind us. We walk through it together, the drive and the bell over the door, the grocer who knew your name, the meat cut to order, the coffee ground fresh, the candy chosen with a nickel and all the time in the world. Such ordinary things, and yet, laid end to end, they made a life. Think for a moment about the people who lived this every week, the mothers with their pencil lists, the grocers in their aprons, the boys who carried the bags to the car. They rose early and made the coffee and went quietly about the business of feeding a family and holding a neighbourhood together. They looked out for one another. They trusted and were trusted. They did not think they were living in a golden age. They were just living, the way people always have, with care and thrift and small daily kindnesses that no one thought to praise. Maybe you can carry a little of it forward, not the whole vanished world, only a piece of it, to slow down a little, to learn a name, to notice a morning while you are in it, before it becomes a memory. That was their quiet gift, and it is still ours to give. So tonight, as you settle into your pillow and let the day drift away, hold that warmth close. Somewhere, a screen door is tapping shut. The coffee is on. Someone knows your name. And that has always been enough. Rest now. You're here and you are safe.